The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Ready?
We're broadcasting, yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 1:30 meeting of the North Carolina State and Local Government Commission. We have a full agenda today. We have many guests that have joined us, mainly from the Wilmington area and some from the folks who are going to talk to you about the Viable Utility Reserve, and dozens and dozens of people joining us online. So we appreciate all of you being here. If you'll stand and join me for our Pledge of Allegiance, and then Secretary Marshall Bobby can join us for our salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
And to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute to the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the Old North State love, loyalty, and faith.
Thank you all. And for those of you in our last meeting, Alder Wood has this background in her car. It makes it, we think she's in her office downtown. She's actually in the parking lot. Were you in your office downtown?
No.
Oh.
Yes, I was.
So we're glad to have you all. Cindy, if you'll call roll to determine quorum.
So, right, Auditor Wood, here. Person. Secretary, we'll come back. Secretary Penny, you're in person. Mr. Burns?
Here.
Person. Mr. Butler?
Here.
Virtual today, Ms. Harvey? Here. Also virtual, thank you. Ms. Hoffman is absent today. Mr. Philbeck?
Here.
Treasurer Falwell?
Here.
And Secretary Marshall is in the building, she's not in the room.
Might let her know we're cranked up. Thank you all. We'll wait for Secretary Marshall for just a moment. For those,
I'll keep going.
okay, go ahead.
To identify
Housekeeping.
LGC staff in the room. Sharon Edmondson, Secretary. Jennifer Wimmer, Director of Debt. Susan McCullen, Director of Fiscal. Debbie Tomasco, Director of many things. Operations, Technology, and Policy. Myself, Cindy Aiken, Council. Victoria Bledsoe on the board. Ted Brin, Joe Fatima. We've got housekeeping, same as always, nothing new. Please identify yourself when speaking, one at a time, please. Without objection, we'll continue the same procedure. If you make a motion or second the motion, we consider you a yes vote, and we'll skip you in the roll call. The microphone's very sensitive in this room, so please have private conversations outside of the room. The meeting is being recorded on GoToWebinar with the intention of publishing it on our website. The written minutes will continue to be our official record of today's meeting. Yes, LGC agenda is posted at www.nctreasure.com at the Local Government Commission page. If we have any changes in the order of the agenda, we will announce those as we proceed through the meeting. If you have any technical difficulties, anyone list virtual members or public, you can email SLGFD, stands for State Local Government Finance Division, at nctreasure.com. That was it. Just to reiterate, if all members could try to remember to identify yourself when speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And since we have so many joining us through Zoom, I know we have the ability to do this, but please make an extra effort on your side to mute your Zoom when not speaking. So, as far as housekeeping items and conflicts of interest, members, you've seen the agenda that's been presented to you. Does anyone have a potential, actual, or the appearance of a conflict of interest? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to count Secretary Marshall as present. present the whole time. So we'll now go into our FPIC units. Oh, meeting minutes, excuse me. Do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 12th?
State Order Wood, 7.
Okay, thank you. Second? Second, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, Secretary Penny? Thank you. Mr. Burns?
I was not in attendance, but I'll vote aye.
Nay. Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell?
Aye.
Thank you.
We had some technological glitches this morning at the Council of State, so I announced the governor of the ZZ Top 10 state all week, so maybe that explains what's going on. First time I saw them, their beards were only this long. Tells you how old I am. All right. For our audience, what we do is we go through our FPIC units. These are folks that are coming before us to get approval for financing. But there's an issue regarding that the board will vote on as far as approving the. Then we'll go through the consent agenda, and then we'll vote on all that at one time unless a member desires for any of those items to be pulled off separately. And then we'll have a discussion item regarding the New Hanover County Project Race. And after that, we'll go through our unit updates. And the unit updates will deal with a lot of the cities that we've had, water sewer districts we've had to take over the last couple of years. Fortunately, there will not be any approvals for putting up or taking down Christmas lights this time. That's on its way as we go into August. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan to talk about Bladen County and Waxhaw.
Huh? Yeah. Jennifer, you want to talk about the debt deals first? Okay. This is Jennifer Wimmer. And the first unit of government that we will be talking about today is Bladen County. They're coming with a $4.4 million loan for the K-8 Tar Heel School to replace the existing middle school building on the existing school site. It is a bank placement with First Bank with the approval rate of 3.25. The loan amount is only a portion of the cost of the entire project, which is $39 million. The rest of it is going to be paid with cash and the needs-based school grants that they got. So Susan will talk about the FPIC issues.
The county had, Bladen County had 2 financial performance indicators of concern. That's what FPIC, that's our acronym for that. The first one, the county did not submit their annual financial audit, which was due on October 31st of 2021 until February 20th, 2022. And their other indicator that they reported in their 2021 audited report, they had over expenditures in the school capital projects fund of that exceeded $200,000. So the county issued us 2 responses relating to these 2 indicators of concern, both of which you have attached. And they're in attachment A. And I'm looking at page 2 of 15 in attachment A. So the responses from the county said that the 2021 audited financial statements were late because there were the county's Department of Social Services was working to develop a corrective action plan to address the Medicaid findings that were reported in the county single audit, and that took them some time to get that corrected corrected, and they did write an extensive plan. They shared a copy of it with me. The school capital project fund, those over expenditures were caused by a breakdown in communication between the school system and the county. The school system applied for a capital needs grant before discussing it with the county. Since then, they have agreed to improve communications going forward, and that should help that finding not to recur. The county's responses were satisfactory. And I believe that somebody from the county is on the.
We have Mr. Jeffrey Wells, who is the town manager.
Yes. The county manager, yes.
Mr. Wells, can you hear us?
Jeffrey, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, but I'm actually representing the town of Waxhaw, not Bladen County.
I apologize.
Yeah, you're looking for Gregory Martin,
Look
I
for Greg
think.
Martin.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
We're calling on you anyway, Jeffrey.
Greg Martin is not with us. Let me see if Lisa Coleman
Lisa
is.
Coleman might be.
Yeah.
Yes, Lisa Coleman.
Okay, Lisa Coleman is. Lisa Coleman, Mr. Treasurer, is the finance officer for Bladen County. Ms. Coleman, are you able to hear us?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. And Greg's with me.
You're off the hook, Jeffrey.
We had technical difficulties for a moment.
Thank you. This is State Treasurer Falwell. Thank you for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to add to what Jennifer or what Susan said in their report regarding Bladen County? And the late audit and the lack of communication between the school board and yourselves.
No, sir. Both were unfortunate situations. We believe they were one-time isolated issues, and we do not anticipate having any similar problems going forward.
Okay. Thank you. While we got the Bladen County folks on the line, is there any, let's get a motion to accept staff's recommendation and ask for discussion. Do I hear a motion to accept staff's recommendation regarding?
I so move.
And second?
Second. Alder Wood.
Okay. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I didn't exactly get how the failure to communicate prior to applying for a grant was the reason they overexpended by $210,000.
I can explain. That particular grant requires both the school system and the county to apply together. So apparently the school system just got ahead of the county and got some and applied, and so there were expenditures that happened that were not quite in sync the way they had to both be. Because both the chairman and the chairman of both boards have to apply for that grant. Specifics to this situation, Lisa or Gregory can speak to.
So they spent money thinking they were going to get the grant, but didn't get the grant because it didn't have two sets of signatures.
Lisa or Gregory, can y'all speak to it?
This is Greg. I'll be glad to speak to that. We were all aware of the grant and the fact that it had been awarded to Bladen County for this Tar Heel project. However, we didn't realize that the school system was incurring expenses prior to June 30th, and we did not find out about it until after June 30th, and therefore it was too late for us to take the necessary action to be in compliance with the requirements.
So it was a timing budgeting issue.
Any other questions? Greg and Lisa, you ruined our record. We have no conflicts in this state between school boards and county.
I think we're all on the same page now with the school.
Madam Vice Chair is shaking her head. So anyway, I'll call for a vote. The clerk will call a roll. And Bladen County, this is the treasurer again. I just wanted to tell you that, as you already know, your OPEB liability for post-healthcare retirement It's about $22 million. So I hope that as you're watching the pennies and paper clips that you'll do what a lot of other counties and cities are doing and putting money toward that liability, because ultimately those public service workers will expect for their medical bills to be paid. And your teachers, your elders unfunded liability is $7 million, and your LEO pension liability is about almost $2 million. So I just wanted to let you have that as items as you go forward in your budget process moving forward.
Thank you.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, for Bladen County, the motion Butler, second Wood. Secretary Barnwell? Aye. Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Thank you. And Treasurer Folwell?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Greg and Lisa, thank you for joining us. You also have no money sitting at nccash.com. So just wanted to inform you of that, and congratulations on your agreement. And will your audit be in on time this year?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now go to Waxhaw.
So the second unit is Waxhaw, and they are coming in for a $21 million loan. It's a bank placement with Truist Commercial Equity, 3.5%, to construct a town campus, a town hall, administrative chamber, council chambers, so public service, admin, storage, and work bays. They already own this property, so they're just developing it. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Okay, the town of Waxhaw also had 2 financial performance indicators of concern as a result of their 2021 audit. They also issued their financial statements, submitted them to us late. They were due on October 31st of 2021, and we received them on January 24th of 2022. And then the town also had a statutory violation that was related to over expenditures for a lease agreement that was related to vehicles. The town's response that is dated June 28th of 2022 is attached to the packet. Both the late audit report and the statutory violation that they reported are related to the same leasing program. The lessor provided incorrect cost information, and the town initially recorded the lease entry incorrectly. When that correction was made, it resulted in over expenditure. The town plans to seek accounting staff training so that staff are prepared going forward with the new governmental accounting for leases under GASB statement number 87. The town's response was satisfactory to the FPICs.
Okay.
And Mr. Treasurer, we still have Mr. Wells with us.
Okay, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, this Treasurer Falwell. Is there anything you'd like to add to the Susan's report about talk?
No, sir, nothing to add, but just like our peers prior to us, we do believe that it was a isolated incident. I'm here with my finance director, Ms. Rosie Dodd, to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosie, for joining us. I'll entertain a motion a second and get the discussion going for any further questions. I'll move approval. Thank you, Mr. Burns. Second.
Second, Ms. Harvey.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Any further discussion? Jeffrey and Rosa, this is the treasurer again. Good news is that, as you know, Waxhaw has no unfunded healthcare liability, 0. And your Elders liability is $2.3 million, and your LEO Elders liability is $814,000. So those are your unfunded liabilities, and it's obviously a big state that who is your new mayor?
Our mayor is Ronald Pappas, and he's been mayor since November 2019.
Thank you. Well, tell the mayor hello. And I think I was getting confused with Craig Horn. He must be an Indian Trail.
He is the town of Weddington, just north of us.
Okay, I had the W right. So, thank you. We've got a motion second on the floor. Any further discussion or questions regarding Waxhaw? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay. The motion Burns and second Harvey. Auditor Wood? Aye. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Thanks. And Treasurer Falwell?
Aye.
Thank you.
Members, we are now at beginning our consent agenda, which starts at Cedar Point, and it ends at North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, which just met prior to this meeting. Does any member desire, for information purposes or conflict purposes, for any part of the consent agenda to be removed and voted on separately? Okay, going once. Hearing none, before I ask for a motion, I won't go through all of these, but just to let the LGC members know that the Buncombe County has 135 million of unfunded healthcare liability, but they have 35 million in the bank. So kudos to them. Charlotte has 350 million of unfunded healthcare liability, but 165 million in the bank. Kudos to them. And Concord has 45 million of unfunded liability with 15 million in the bank. And the rest of the folks on the consent agenda have no money sitting in OPEB reserves or liability offsets. And the largest one remaining on the consent agenda that has nothing put aside for their unfunded healthcare liability is Wayne County, $45 million. And as we talk about Wayne County, we need to keep that community and the family of the deputy who lost his life this morning in the line of duty to an incident that happened a few days ago in our thoughts and prayers, and we'll be adjourning our meeting today in his family's honor. So with that, do I hear a motion to? Yes. Yes. Jennifer.
One comment on that, we need to pull the item for Graham until next month. The loans have increased and we want to further review those. So they have been notified as well as our partners at DEQ, and we will have that on the September agenda.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's being pulled by?
They received a second federal grant that's serviced by the State Department of Environmental Quality, and the amount went up. And we want to make sure that the unit of government can pay for that.
So they received more money, but what went up?
The loan amount,
They
because
received the
of
grant.
cost increases. The project was bid and there was cost increases. They got a second loan to pay for that through DEQ.
All right.
So we want to make sure that it doesn't burden their finances. The project has not changed.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that you have before you, starting with Cedar Point, ending with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency without the city of Graham. Do I hear that motion?
Auditor Wood, so moved.
Second.
Philbeck, second.
Motion is second. Before I ask the clerk to call the roll, I don't want to get into this conversation tonight, but this afternoon, but as we continue to approve these deals for this beach renourishment, just literally stopping in one community and starting right next to it, 5 feet away. that there's a lot of coordination going on the coast about if there's any possible way to do this more efficiently. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's a lot of territory, or it's very territorial. But beach renourishment should be beach renourishment, and it just seems like, I'm not a big beach person, but it just seems like the fixed cost of bringing all this equipment out there and starting and stopping and picking up, and you may get this bid, but then you don't get the bid for the next 2 miles, and you have to pick all that stuff up and get the bid for the other one. Just kind of thinking about any way to do this more efficiently, because we're approving, I think we probably approved $100 million worth of possibly beach renourishment monies this year. So just a thought. Nobody should even shake their head on this yet, but just a thought on maybe we can do it better. So we have a motion, second, for any further discussion. Jennifer, do you have anything else?
Other than the Peakway Marina project, it's going to be $1.7 million less. It does not affect the not to exceed amount, but that is because Wake County is going to put in their share up front as cash, so they have to borrow less money.
Yeah, we're okay with liability, but anyway, that's another thing. So, given that, is there anything else? We have a vote, we have a motion.
Yes.
Okay, in a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Just to be clear, the consent agenda includes Cedar Point through the second listed North Carolina Housing Finance Agency item, which is in the miscellaneous items group, except for the city of Graham, which is pulled. The motion is Wood, second Philbeck, Secretary Marshall. Aye. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
And Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now down to discussion. We're now down to our discussion item for the New Hanover County Library and Museum. I just want to make a couple of opening comments about this before we proceed. I was in Wilmington recently, and met with Lease at NCGFOA convention for a few moments, and as you can probably tell by my questions, not only have I had questions about the transaction, but we've also had a lot of questions from the public. And it's our responsibility. It's not our responsibility to govern your community, but it's our responsibility to provide any assistance that we can to do any project as efficiently as possible, either from the creation of it to the financing of it. Lisa sent me a 2-page memo that has these broad categories: why new library and museum, the P3 model, what's the deal structure. And I just want to touch on a couple of points that I highlighted in the 2 pages that she sent me. One is that this is an old department store building, and back in the day, there was an emphasis on adaptive reuse of buildings when it came to government services. In her remarks, she said that because of that and other things, that many of our current facilities are no longer meeting the expectations of their citizens. In addition, as far as the museum, for those of you who want to get a visual on this, the library is right in the middle of the heart of downtown. Was an old department store, and the museum is the old armory, which is across from the hospital. So I suggest you not speed when you sit there, whether school's in or school's out. And when she talks about the museum, she talks about water intrusion, which prevents storage of some of the collection of things that are sitting in the museum, and that the museum actually needs a purpose-built facility, a better location to convey the rich history of our region, that the industrial standard exhibits that are required for stay in time. There's also talk in here, and you'll have questions from me on this as we move forward about why did you pursue a P3 model. We're talking about a whole city block here, and the ability to control the development and how you sell property, whether it's subject to upset bid. So I just want to start from the beginning by telling the folks who have joined us today from New Hanover County that everything that I've just said and just highlighted, the first part especially, there's no disagreement here on what you stated. I know there's disagreement in your community as to whether this historical building should be torn down, but that's for your local elected officials to talk about. I also want to tell you that I have not spoken with any member of this LGC committee regarding this issue. When things have been sent out, they've been sent out to everybody at the same time. I did see Secretary Marshall and Alderman Wood this morning to make sure they were going to be here in person or online today regarding this transaction. So I just want to tell you that's the process that we have followed. Met with Lisa. I went to the library that day and walked through and got one of the brochures and walked around the block, and from that, all my consultations have been with Joe and the rest of the staff here today. That's it. So with that, I will see how the board would like to proceed. Know that we have a presentation here, and know that first thing we're going to do is ask people in the audience who are here for Operation Grace to introduce themselves and tell us why they are here. I think that'd be helpful to the board. This is very much, it's not the Supreme Court, except that when something is on someone's mind on this LGC, we sort of interrupt sometimes and ask the question. So just kind of get used to that. I'm probably the worst. So with that, if the folks that have joined us to be here in person from New Hanover County, if you would just tell us who you are and what you do.
First, thank you all for having us here today. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to share information on Project Grace with you. I'm Lisa Wertzbacher. I'm the Assistant County Manager for New Hanover County.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Rigby, and I serve as the county's Chief Strategy Officer. Good afternoon, and thank you again for allowing us all to be here and to be a part of this process with you. I am Deb Hayes. I'm the Vice Chair of the County Commissioners, and I appreciate very much the opportunity to speak to you about our game-changing Project Grace.
Hello, I'm Kemper Poe, a Deputy County Attorney. Good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon now. Adam Tucker with Zimmer Development Company. I'm the Director of Development at Zimmer. We're a local company based out of Wilmington, North Carolina. For you that may or may not have heard of us, if you've been to Wilmington and been to Mayfair, we were co-developers for that. And, we're the selected developer through the RFP process. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak today.
Amy Schaefer with Lee Case. I'm here with Mr. Tucker and Zimmer Development and the county to answer any questions or just be here in support of Project Grace. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Cradle. After 24 years as the Chief Financial Officer of First Bank, I joined the county on June the 1st as Chief Financial Officer, following in Lisa's footsteps. Thank you.
Tim Buckland, the Intergovernmental Affairs Manager. Okay. Thank you all. This presentation that you handed out, who was going to present it and how long did you schedule to do that in?
It is roughly, I would say, 15 minutes of information. I was planning on presenting that.
Okay, yeah. And as we go through, you'll get some questions maybe from the board regarding a memorandum of understanding, an agreement to pay architectural fees if the LGC doesn't approve this. These are all serious questions, but none of them are meant to be hostile. We all have things, we come from different places and when we come to ask questions. So just work with us on that. Does that suit the board? Go ahead and have Lisa do the presentation, then we go from there.
May I ask a question? Ms. Schaefer, I'm not familiar with Lee Case. What is Lee Case?
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. It's a law firm in Wilmington, North Carolina. I was previously the assistant city attorney for the city of Wilmington and the interim city attorney. So have done a lot of land use and familiar with that block in Wilmington. And so helping Zimmer and the county through the process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
And when did you leave the county?
I left the city about 3 years ago, sir.
Oh, the city.
Yes, sir. I was with the city of Wilmington. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Can those board members, especially joining us by Zoom, just let Debbie or someone know if you can't hear us, okay? All right, Lisa, you want to come up to the table there? By the way, we got complaints last meeting about me opening too many bags of popcorn. It was distracting the people's ability to listen, so they now provide me a bowl, so I don't have to.
Would you mind going to the next slide?
Oh, I want to thank Victoria and others for technologically driving the train today.
So just a little bit, and the treasurer touched on some of this, a little bit about Project Grace, and I guess the first question, why a new library and museum? New Hanover County owns an entire block in downtown Wilmington and what I would call really the heart of downtown. It's between 2nd and 3rd Street and Gray Street and Chestnut Street. So it is right on the main road coming into downtown Wilmington. Currently, the block is underutilized. As it was mentioned, the library is an old department store that was built in 1951. Also on that block is a parking deck. In addition to the library and the parking deck, there is a repurposed auto dealership that now houses some EMS workers and trucks, and also some surface lots. So the block is very utilized. The current library is roughly 100,000 square feet in total square footage, but square feet is only around 60,000 square feet.
Lisa, is that because of staffing issues?
Well, some of that 100,000 is the basement. Some of it are mechanical rooms and things of that nature. The current museum is a former armory building that was built in 1937. The facility is limited as a museum because of ceiling heights and load-bearing walls. As it was mentioned, we have had flooding in the museum. It causes an issue with where the historical collections are stored at. And then in addition, the museum is about a mile away from the downtown library, so it is not in an ideal location. And having the two facilities together would really have some synergy that is not currently there with those two functions. The next slide, please. We chose to pursue the public-private partnership for a variety of reasons. But the first is that we're able to add tax base by requiring the developer to invest a certain amount of private development on that block. That does move the needle forward in the county's strategic objective of leveraging public infrastructure to encourage private investment. That's part of our Board of Commissioners strategic plan.
Can I interrupt you and ask you, when you were putting out this RFP and asking the developer to do this, I know there's been a special provision through the General Assembly that allows you to get around to have a different way of dealing with some of the 3P partnership rules. So when you put this out, did you say it needs to be 75-25 so that you could comply with the special got, or were you thinking as creatively as possible about how to do this as efficiently as possible and finance it as cheaply as possible.
Well, the RFP was put together with the legislation in mind, and honestly, I don't recall specifically what was in the RFP in terms of the percentages. I'm not sure, Jennifer, if you recall that.
But under the special provision that was passed, not specifically for Project Grace, but close to it, there was some different denominator, there were different percentages versus the rest of the state. So I'm asking, this is an example of we just interrupting people. So but I'm just asking if did that drive, like how intense or how dense or how much retail or how this or how that, did that drive?
From the county's perspective, I wouldn't say that drove the decision. I mean, we wanted to have proposals, as many as possible, that would put forth the best arrangement for the county. So I don't know that we necessarily had those percentages in mind when going through that process.
That you do have to comply with those percentages. Correct. To have them. Okay.
So in addition to increasing the tax revenue for the county, with the current structure, and we'll talk about it in just a few minutes, but with the current structure, we have a fixed lease cost that we would be, you can go back, a fixed lease cost. So should the project come in over budget, the county's lease cost is still fixed. And then in addition, we're able to control the use of the property on the private side of the block. We can ensure we have compatible uses on the private side. And we're also able, through this arrangement, to require a certain amount of workforce housing on that block as well.
So when you said lease costs, and other members could chime in, but wouldn't that be as viable as some additional things that you've done recently with the memorandum of understanding? I mean, you can say the lease costs are set, fixed, and if the cost of the building ends up being more, then the developer's going to eat that. But they can come back to the board and say, boy, we just really missed this by a lot, and we need another $15 billion, or we need another $1 billion a year in lease. There's nothing that you say that now, and I believe you when you do say it, but there's nothing that prevents that from it being just upward.
Certainly they could ask, our Board of Commissioners would have to approve that because that's the lease rate is a part of what our Board of Commissioners approved. Okay. So
excuse me, and can we go back to the slide before?
Sure.
And when you say you control the use of the property, the private, you control the private part. Explain to me exactly what that means. So your museum is the public use,
correct?
Obviously, correct. And then you've got this housing that's public, I guess considered public. So the private, how are you in? I saw there was a hotel.
Yes.
So how are you going to be in control of define what that means?
So when under normal circumstances, and I'm sure you already all know this, but when you sell a piece of property, you can't really put covenants and conditions on it. Through the P3 model, we are allowed to put restrictions on the land that we sell to the developer. So for instance, the timing of when the taxable investment would be made, what types of taxable investment would be made. So that's what we mean by control the use of the property, so that someone we don't sell the land to a developer and then 10 years later, nobody's done anything with it. Does that help?
Yes, but do you control what goes on it?
Yes. Yes, there's a memorandum of understanding.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that question?
Sure.
So this board approved a year or two ago your new government center, and it came to us as a 3P partnership. Our staff came back and said, you got one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and you got a AAA bond rating. Why didn't you partner for anything? Fair question. So you ended up sharpening your pencil and you end up just going with a conventional type of financing for the new government center that's currently under construction.
So we still have a P3 model, but we are borrowing as opposed to leasing.
Okay. Now, it's my understanding by riding by there that you're building a new government complex sort of near the one that you're in now.
In
Now,
the parking lot. In the parking lot.
right. So the one that you're in now, who will have control of that when all that's said and done?
It will be sold to the developer.
Okay, and board members, just go with me for a minute because it is kind of important. So is it sold to the developer based on the upset bid laws that other local governments have to abide by?
No, we're utilizing the P3 model. So it's the same concept. We're selling it to the developer with restrictions on what will be put on that property beside our building.
Okay. So how is that a benefit to the taxpayers? I mean, what if somebody just wanted to pay more? And what are they going to put there? And it's been my experience that if you pay enough for a piece of property, you can't afford to put anything shabby on it. You know, if you pay enough for a piece of property, you got to put something of value on top of it. So with the government center transaction, how is that a benefit? What benefit did you really get by agreeing to sell it to this one person without it being subject to upset bid?
So the same concept, we were able to ensure that, number one, the right type of development was next to the government center. We were able to control a minimum amount of private investment, and we were able to control the timing that was built in, ensuring that the private investment happens quickly and we're able to generate tax revenue.
Okay. So what is going to be built there? Then I'll go to Mr. Burns. That was my question.
It will be a mixed use. There will be some retail and some residential, and then there will be another component with some office complex.
Yes, you got
I'm just curious. The housing, retail and housing is going to go in where your current government center is now?
Yes.
Is there any control over any percentage of that being workforce or affordable housing? So you would not, my understanding from my 4 years as commissioner was that you sold it outright. You couldn't say, you buy this from us, you will put 20% affordable housing in your development. For one, that would reduce the price you might be able to get. But secondly, I don't think you're allowed to do that. Is that right?
Well, through the P3 partnership,
Through the
that's what
P3,
we are, but under normal circumstances, correct.
Okay. So is it a stated goal of the county commission and the city council that workforce housing be incorporated in development in downtown Wilmington? And is the 5% as much as you can put in for this next program, or is it, or?
That's what's been negotiated.
That's what's been negotiated. That was the policy decision of the county commission. Okay. Thanks.
Good back. Okay.
So again, the purpose of this project is to revitalize that entire block, and what's up there now is what the block currently looks like. It's split up into several sections. The box that's pink is the pieces, and blue are the pieces that will remain the public use, the county's assets, and then the box in yellow will be the developer's piece to put the private investment on. Just to give you all a little bit of background, the board of commissioners set 5 goals for this project to capture. One of them was to capture the full market potential on the block, also to have a modern library and museum, having usable outdoor space, ensuring that the project was designed in a way that would be pedestrian friendly, and that it had to include workforce housing. So with those goals clearly stated, we did go through an RFQ process and then an RFP process. The Zimmer Development Company was selected as the partner with New Hanover County.
May I ask?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Please, after you.
How many bids did you get?
We had two firms.
Agreeing, we're adjourned.
RFQ, and Zimmer was the only company to submit for the RFQ.
Did that shock you?
Does
Really,
me.
it's a complicated lot downtown, so.
I would think a lot be jumping on that. Who wrote all the specs?
County staff.
Okay. Mr. Burns, you have another one? We were simpatico there. How many bids did you have? I guess that my question then is have you done any due diligence to assure that you did get the full market value through one bid? And what is that due diligence and how did you turn it?
So we had done, before we actually went out for the RFP process, we had had a market study done on what the highest and best use for that property would be. So when we got the RFP, we knew that it was in line with that study that had been done. Does that help?
It does. I mean, the value returned to the county and your proposal is equivalent to what the market study showed it would be worth. Is that right?
Yeah.
Who's constructing the government complex that's being built now?
Our government center is being constructed by, the developer is a developer called FD Stonewater. And then the actual construction company is Thomas Construction.
And who, what's the process like for putting these things out for bid? I mean, you sort of have to really watch for these kinds of things. So unless you live there and kind of know what's going on, which Zimmer does. So I'm just asking the question, what's the advertisement piece of it? What effort was made to get it out there?
So all of our RFPs, RFQs are all put out on our public website. Do you recall?
Just sits there. People have to know to go there.
Right. There were some additional methods we used in this particular case. We issued, we shared the RFP with a number of professional associations, the Urban Land Institute, the American Institute of Certified Planners, and a number of other architectural professional associations to ensure that we would get enough solicitations. And this particular solicitation was done a number of years ago as well.
But that's not a contractor. That's not a developer. You're welcome to come up and sit if you like. All the people you just mentioned are not developers.
That's correct.
So as I mentioned, this project has a lot of different parameters. The first that we'll talk about is the actual library and museum piece in the pink. So under the P3 model,
Can I interrupt you just so people can visualize this? This is being flipped so that the current library can continue to operate while the new one's being built.
Thank you. That's an excellent one. Yes, sir. So on the public side, in pink, there's going to be a new combined library and museum facility constructed. The development team has designed the facility in consultation with our staff. Our staff have been along every step of the way, determining what the space needs are and what the design needs to look like. And the developer will be responsible for the construction of the facility. The developer's cost will include all the design and construction, and FF&E, except for museum exhibits, the county is going to take on the museum exhibits because they are very specific to what we need. The library.
The county's going to be responsible for the exhibiting,
for the actual exhibit, so the fabrication of the exhibit,
which is hugely expensive.
We have a budget of $7.5 million for that.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I don't deal with P3s a lot, and I don't know all this background stuff that apparently a lot of everybody do. The county owns this land.
Yes.
So it's going to be transferred to the developer?
No, the land that is sitting under the pink portion will remain in the ownership of the county. We'll have a ground lease because Zimmer will have the actual ownership of the building until our lease is over. So we will ground lease the portion that's under the pink part to them until the lease is over
So
and then the land.
The ownership of the building is not going to attribute to the land.
Right. So during the lease term, the new library and museum facility will be owned by the developer. After the 20-year lease is over, the ownership of the building will also transfer into the county's name. So we would own the building.
And what about the rest of the development on the block? Who will, 25 years from now, who will own that?
The parking deck will
Okay.
remain the ownership of the county, and the portion in the yellow box will be sold to the developer.
And that's, okay. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yes. But the facility will be roughly 85,000 square feet. 37,000 of that will be the library, 42,000 square feet of that will be the museum, and there'll be 6,000 square feet of shared space. As I mentioned, the developer will own the facility and lease it to the county for 20 years at an annual lease cost of $4,003,000. And then at the end of the lease, the ownership will transfer to the county.
Okay, so how'd you arrive at that number?
So the developer has essentially a return that they're trying to gather each year. It's about 8% of their cost. So we went through a financial exercise to, and we'll go over this in just momentarily, but we looked at that cost compared to the revenues that we would be receiving from the private investment to ensure that they equated to what we could go out to the market and borrow money for.
All right, let's take that one step at a time. So what's driving the lease payment is the return on capital back to the development company.
That is part of it, yes, sir, because this is a negotiation process between the county and the developer.
So if you just use real estate cap rates, your cost of borrowing right now is 2.5%.
To go to the public market, we're about, I think we were 3.25, not quite 3.25, the last deal.
So if their cap rate's 8 and yours is 3, there's got to be a lot of juice in there to make theirs more advantageous than yours as far as calculating the lease payment. So I know you had a public hearing on the lease. Did you have a public hearing on the sale of the land?
So the public hearing was on the memorandum of understanding, and then we had the public hearing on the lease. There has not been a public hearing on the sale of the land because that's not occurred yet. The concept of selling the land at fair market value was a part of the memorandum of understanding, but there has not been a public hearing specific on the sale of the land.
I thought there wasn't going to be a sale of the land. The
There
county was
is-
going to own that land.
Right, yep, so we're jumping around. So the portion that the county's library and
Oh,
museum,
You're talking about the yellow part.
right, the
Oh,
yellow
okay.
part will be
Oh,
sold.
okay.
Yep, sorry. Okay,
How's this
so-
going for you?
what's that?
How's this going for you?
Well, I hope that I'm sharing information that you all need. We're jumping around a little bit, so I know that there's missing pieces.
It's going more than 15 minutes, but let me.
It's not her fault.
That's not your fault. This is a museum too, right?
No, that is not.
That is not.
No, that is it's an office building.
Thank you.
And the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe, sure. You want, oh, no. Looks the same from the top. All right.
So I guess I am interested to know that if you look at the deal, and I get that the developer's got a return that they're looking for, and then you sort of back into this whole thing, so it's on paper that this is not costing you more than if you just went out and got the money for the sale.
Yeah, we have a slide on that to kind of go through those numbers. We can flip to it now, or we can, okay.
But the 8% return is just on the lease.
That is the developer's return on their costs. That's what that annual lease payment represents.
Right. But the value of being on the, controlling everything else on that block has a giant, enormous return, which is not embedded in your lease calculation.
I'm not sure I'm totally following.
Well, what I'm saying is the profit off of everything else they're going to be doing associated with this $80 million library, which is not which is a fantastic anchor. If you're having a library and a museum and you got retail and hospitality and restaurants sitting there, a lot of added, the county bring the library and the museum are bringing a lot of added value to the private development part of this piece, which you're getting ready to go in.
That's the park, the ability to park right there.
Right, and the parking.
All right, so the parking deck is kind of a smaller part of this project. The county owns and operates the parking deck now. We'll continue to own and operate the parking deck. We will have a parking agreement with the developer that will bring additional revenue into the county as well. There's also going to be some improvements to the parking deck that are required because of the design of the museum and library facility. There's some additional improvements.
How many parking places are there in the parking deck?
There are 620 right now, and we believe we can squeeze another 20 out of that with some additional restriping of some areas.
Okay. So in motel terms, what is the occupancy of that parking deck currently?
So that is really difficult to answer because it is different on different days. If there's a day that the courthouse is very close to this parking deck and there are a lot of jurors that come in, the parking deck is more full. If not, it's relatively empty. If there's an event happening downtown, it will be more full. So it's really hard to tell, to give you an occupancy rate.
What does it cost to park there for the day?
It is, I believe it's $8 a day, and we have a monthly fee, which is $55 a month.
And accessing this parking lot as a food consumer or as a housing consumer or as a retail shop consumer, there's no entrance and exit. None of that has to be reconfigured.
No entrances or exits have to be reconfigured. What has to be reconfigured is where one of our stairwells and elevators are.
There could be some awnings or covered walkways or something.
Okay. So then the private side of the block, once, as it was mentioned before, once the museum and library are complete, the county would sell that part of the block to the developer for fair market value. And then the main library branch would move in the new facility, as would the museum. The current library would be torn down, and the developer would construct private investment, including residential housing, including workforce housing, hotel, and retail space. Of course, this private development is bringing in tax revenue for New Hanover County and the municipalities, not only in terms of property tax, but with the hotel, we would have additional room occupancy tax and sales tax as well.
When you say you purchased the land, that the developer will purchase land at fair market value, has that value been determined in the current agreement, or will it be determined at the time of the sale?
It will be determined at the time of the sale. Currently, the value is about $2.5 million.
So, follow Mr. Burns, the 850,000 numbers in my mind. Where did I get that?
That was a very early number, and it is included in the financial model. A very early number of our estimate of what the fair market value was. When we got the appraisal done, it was 2.5, and to kind of keep our financial model consistent and not keep changing things every other day, we just left it at the 850.
And so, was our staff aware of that? The 2.5 versus.
Yes, I believe I shared that with Joe.
Okay.
Yes.
So we just need to erase 850 from our heads.
Yes, please erase it.
All right, and the, what?
I was raising it.
So now the 850 is changed into 2.5. Okay. And that's for 1.2 acres.
Correct. And again, the advantage of the P3 model is that it does allow us to sell the land with the restrictions in terms of the type of investment and the timing of that private investment.
So let's take timing away for a moment and talk about the restrictions. So I'm sure it's in the deck somewhere, but what will be there? I mean, is this what will be there?
What will be there, yes, is the residential housing, including workforce, hospitality, and a small amount of retail space. There's only 10,000 square feet of retail space.
I couldn't really tell because I'm not an architect from these drawings. So how many units of things will it be?
100 and, please correct me
33?
if I'm wrong, it's 150 units.
It's a, right now we're,
Identify yourself, sorry.
it's Adam Tucker with Zimmer Development.
Come on up here. You'll probably have more questions.
So right now we're scheduled to do 100 residential units on the, I'll call it page left, half the block. And it's schematic design right now. And the other, the hotel and hospitality is like 150 keys roughly. And so there'll be two separate towers as we have it kind of planned now. And part of what's driving that is just what you were talking about, which was a great question on the parking. Right, so everybody, we have to have enough parking, so that limits what we can develop. So we had actually a parking study done by Kimley Horn that looked at, okay, well, the museum and the library are having a lot of day use. So there's going to be more people there using it in the day, where the residents and the hotel users are going to be out and about during the day. So at night, when the museum and library users are gone, the residents come back. So we feel good about where we are from a density standpoint. And to go back to your point on the housing piece of it, the 5% can go up, but only having 100 units, committing 20% makes it difficult. So the 5% is a floor at this point.
So how much is all that? And just don't agree with me if you don't want to agree with me. But when you say who said retail is only at 10,000?
Yes.
Okay. Who said that?
I did.
Okay, so it's like 4 houses, so to speak. So I don't want to focus on the little stuff. I don't want to get distracted with something. So that's the smallest thing in this development, right? That 10,000 square feet. The big thing is the hotel and the housing. Those are the big ones.
Correct.
Okay, how many square? All right, so that's 150 keys and 100 units. What's your total investment and all that?
Right now, we've got about 30 million on it. I think it'll end up being more than that, but just like the land cost, I don't want to overestimate. The 30 million, anything more than that's only going to be better for the county. And the way we derived our revenue was based off of, the revenue to the county was based more on historical data from what other hotels are generating downtown and what other apartments that are currently built. So rather than guessing what we might have, we're using actual data to forecast what the revenue to the county will be. So whatever we spend from a dollar standpoint from the developer will translate more so with the historical data we have on a per unit and per key basis that we have data on.
So there is a minimum amount of private investment, which is the roughly 30 million that Adam alluded to. But the tax revenue that's generated is not based on the cost of that it takes him to build it. It's based on the value of that building. So we had our tax department look at the preliminary schematic designs to determine what would this type of investment bring back in terms of tax revenue.
Okay. So we own a lot of hotels in this building in our pension plan. We just sold the Cosmopolitan last month. 150 keys. I mean, what do you value a key at?
I don't have that number. I've got the apartment cost, but I don't have the hotel cost with me.
So when you look at the 150 keys, and that's how hotels are valued now, as well as cap rates and EBITDA. So, and I've had to bring out my calculator. I've never done this in 6 years as the treasurer, so making me bring out my calculator. So what do you estimate the square footage cost? It's hard for me to imagine that you can build 150 rooms and all the amenities associated with a hotel and a little over 100 housing units for $30 million.
Well, again,
in this world.
Again, we're using the most conservative estimate that we can because we'd rather come back to you and say, hey, we told you we were going to invest 30 million, and guess what? We invested 50 million. So the numbers that I'm using are very conservative. Again, we're not building a parking deck. Some of your hotels may have parking decks, some of them may not. We're leasing those spaces. We're splitting land costs between two developments. We're splitting site costs between two developments. So just like we were talking about with the P3 model, there's a lot of synergy involved. It's not just a standalone project like you were typical going to see.
So what are you estimating on the square footage, whether it's a key or an apartment? What do you estimate the cost of that per square foot be?
For the
construction cost.
For the retail, we were estimating.
The retail's
I'm sorry, the apartments, we were estimating $150 a foot.
But when I was down there doing market studies, it's costing $285 a foot to build in Wilmington right now.
But we're doing stick building. I don't know what they're doing block and plank. I can't speak to that.
Okay. So you're looking at 100 what per square foot?
150.
And that's for the key or an apartment?
That's per apartment.
Keep going and you continue sitting there if you like. It's fine.
I'm here to answer whatever questions you have.
So I just have to ask, so if the developer has a percentage return on its cost, 8%, and
that's on the lease only. Not on this other.
so I'm just trying to figure out, are they going to get out of this what they want if it goes from 30 to 50 without coming back to the table and wanting something else? Follow on, Matt.
This is not what they're talking.
No, it's a different section. You're paying a flat 2.5 million for the property that's going to become the hotel and the apartments, right? That section of the block is not involved in the lease back at all.
It's on the fuchsia.
It's on the.
It's on the fuchsia dot.
Right, the lease is on the pink area, and the sale of the property, the 2.5 that you mentioned, is on the yellow.
So if you have to put 50 million in to build what you want to build, that you're estimating 30 million now, that will be on you. That extra 20 is not coming out of it.
That's right. That's what I guess maybe I'm not doing a good job of explaining it. From your side of the table, whether it costs me 50 million or 10 million doesn't matter because you don't have any risk in that. And the county is not calculating what return they're going to get on that side of the street or that side of the block because they're using building values for tax purposes and occupancy tax and things like that.
You have a memorandum of agreement that keeps you from putting up a 7-Eleven on that corner, right? It's
Yeah,
going to
well,
be.
that's part of goes back to those percentages, right? That we have to do a certain amount of investment. So if we have to invest 30 million or whatever that number is to meet that percentage, then that precludes us from doing a 7-Eleven and a.
Nothing against 7-Eleven. I wish we had. We don't have it here. You're going to spend
2.5 million.
millions of dollars building 2 buildings. And those will be on the tax rolls of New Hanover County at that point, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm not a zoning expert, Mr. Burns and others are. So when you say you can't control, I filed legislation about upset bids for city and local government. So this is not specific to New Hanover County. I've been dealing with this for 12 years. Okay. So from a zoning standpoint, even though you quote you can't control, I agree. lawyers will probably tell me I should agree, but in the reality, I think you can control a lot with the development of something just by whatever your relationship is. So my question specifically is, the zoning standpoint, doesn't this parking deck really determine what should be built on this property? I mean, you can't put a 20-story high-rise on this property, right? Because there's no parking. It can't be the tallest building. It couldn't be the tallest residential building in Wilmington because there's not enough parking in that deck to support that.
Yes, sir.
So doesn't that deck, in that deck's, even though it's not in no deed anywhere, isn't it sort of a controlling factor?
Say that one more time.
In the parking deck spaces, isn't that sort of a controlling factor without it quote being a controlling factor? As far as what you can do with this?
Well, I mean, I don't think that just in theory, I don't think there's parking requirements in downtown Wilmington anymore. So you could build whatever you wanted and not have to park it when you're downtown.
Really?
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. So, but get back to kind of morphing these two questions together. The 8% return on capital is associated with the lease only.
Correct.
The way that Zimmer has this mapped out, whether it's 30 million or 50 million, what will be the return to Zimmer for everything else?
We don't know. I mean, it's going to be 4 years from now before it's built. So we have guesstimates, but everything we do is based on 8% on cost.
So what would be your guesstimate about what the return would be on everything outside the museum and library?
8% on cost.
And you get your funding where? Is it you self-financed? Does this deal get financed? Where do you get the 80 million to build the library?
Funding sources, different funding sources.
Is that public?
Sorry?
Is that public record?
Yes, sir. Well, I mean, I guess that there's deed of trust out there, but.
Right.
So generally, just like you buy a house, we have different lending institutions and we negotiate our equity requirement and our rate.
Good. All right. Continue.
Look, I was looking at the parking from another angle, because if you have 100 housing units, you're going to provide a parking space for each one of those,
Or two.
right?
Correct.
Okay. And for the hotel, you're going to provide, you have 150 keys, you're probably going to secure at least 150 parking spaces. So that takes at a minimum 250 parking spaces out of the 620 to 640.
Yes,
Yeah, that, I don't know if that leaves a lot or not much for the other uses. How far is Cape Fear Community College from this? I think it's pretty
They have
close.
several blocks, but they have their own parking deck.
Okay. Well, I have been around down there and had a hard time finding parking.
Me too. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
They built a new deck for the Wilson Center, I guess. But we did, I mean, that's from a private development standpoint, the last thing we want to do is build a hotel and no one have a parking spot.
Right.
And so that's why Kimley Horn is very good at what they do. And we paid them to do a study to make sure that there was going to be enough parking.
What is the height limit in the city of Wilmington for a building?
The height limit, I'm sorry, I apologize, Amy Schaefer. The height limit within the city of Wilmington is based on specific districts. It's my understanding here would be about 4 stories. Is that right, Adam?
No, it's more than that.
It's more than that.
It's got PPD.
Oh, I apologize. No, that's further north.
Here's the CBD.
It's 144 feet in this area.
So that's
10
equivalent to 10 stories?
Yes, ma'am.
This is the.
I apologize. I was thinking of a different project. Sorry.
We're going to go through this for another 5 minutes. I've been requested to take a 5-minute break at 2:55, and then we'll come back into 3. for those joining us by Zoom. All right, go ahead.
Okay. This slide is just in regards to timing and where we are. The final design of the museum and library are complete. We have 100% construction drawings. And currently the bids that have come in are being reviewed and finalized. Also, concurrently, the developer is working on construction permits as well. And so construction could begin as soon as September and continue through 2023 and through the summer of 2024 when it's expected to be completed.
That's the museum part of it and the library
Yes.
part?
So this is the financial analysis that I had referred to. And what this does is compares the public-private partnership model versus the traditional bid, build, borrow. On the left side, you can see the 20 years of lease payment is $80,060,000. We've estimated for 20 years that we can generate $11.6 million in revenues from property taxes based on the minimum required investment for the private side. Also, additional parking revenues. We talked about there being a parking agreement and that having additional revenues. In addition to the estimated sales price of the private side of the block, and this includes the $850 and does not include the fair market value of 2.5. So this number would actually be slightly better when we add in the 2.5 million of fair market value. For
Okay,
that.
so the property taxes asterisk, that's even on the library?
This is being calculated for the private side.
Okay, not the library side.
Correct, yes.
I mean,
I'm sorry, I should have
that was so
specified.
logical. I was embarrassed to even ask it, but I wanted to make sure I get everything.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I should have specified. So that is generating or estimating the generated tax revenue from the private development over 20 years. And that asterisk is really just noting that even after our 20-year lease is completed, we'll still continue to generate those tax revenues from the private investment. So that leaves what we're calling a net lease cost of $68.4 million. As I mentioned, if you put in the true fair market value of $2.5 million of that land, we would actually be closer to $66 million. However, in addition to that, there's also some other community benefits that we are considering because it benefits the county as a whole. The first is the room occupancy tax that would be generated off of the hotel. The district that the hotel would be in is all of that room occupancy tax would go to the city of Wilmington to help fund and maintain the convention center. Also, the hotel would generate sales tax off of room sales. And of course, that would be distributed between all the municipalities within the county in addition to New Hanover County. So that's an additional benefit of 8.7. So when you look at all those together and then compare to the traditional bid, build, borrow of $66 million, we did use a 3% borrowing rate on that cost. And we have in here zero revenues because we won't be able to control what's there. And more importantly, we won't be able to control the timing of when those investments happen. And so we really don't know what that would look like. And so we're comparing the $68.4 million and the additional 8.7 in community benefit to the $66.8 million. We're looking at it in that we really got a $7 million community benefit when you look at all of these factors and comparing the public-private partnership to the traditional bid, build, borrow method.
Well, but the revenues, the other estimated revenue or benefits is not zero. You just don't know what it is.
We don't, and if there is no hotel, there would be no room occupancy tax and no sales tax. There would be property tax if and when somebody else developed on that property.
So again, it's not zero.
But we don't have a way to know.
Exactly.
I mean, you only had one bidder on the RFP. Since, and this has been in use for how many years?
We've been working on this since 2018,
17.
All right. So as it's gotten hot, as it's gotten hotter, and then we'll break. Have other people come to you and said, well, we can put 250 keys on that space and we can generate this much property tax, and this much occupancy tax for the city of Wilmington.
Yeah, we've not had anyone come to us and propose that.
Okay. All right. If you don't mind, I think we'll take just a break and we'll come back in right at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Ready? Yep, sure. recess and just make sure we're cranked. We're cranked up. All right, good. Please.
Okay. So I think we were finishing up this unless there are more specific questions about the financial analysis. I apologize that there's so much information, but a lot to share. I did want to, did you have a
I
question?
do have one quick financial question. The tax status of the museum and library building during the 20 years it's owned by the developer, are you getting any real estate taxes for that or
Well,
property tax
we'd
for
be
that?
paying ourselves. So technically it will be a taxable.
And it's a
piece of
taxable
property.
improvement on the property, right? So, but how are you accounting for that, I guess is my question.
Well, so the taxes that we would be paying for ourselves aren't accounted for. It just, it seemed silly to do that.
But you don't own the edifice on top of the land, right?
We will not own the building. So
that's a taxable,
Owned by somebody else.
and that's no different than a person who has a trailer on my land.
That's correct. That's correct. But the way that the lease is set up, we are responsible for taxes, insurance. So it wouldn't be any
You're writing
taxable
off your own.
revenue coming.
You're writing off your own taxes.
Right.
Which I still think you may have to pay. I'll leave that to the state auditor, but
So you're Secretary of Revenue.
you may have to pay it. You may get it, but you may have to pay it to yourself.
Or the city, well, different tax.
Both city and county. And the municipal services district.
So the only other slide that have I think, some meeting information is just to point out that since we started the financial model some time ago that we had shared with your staff, there have been things that have changed. So construction costs continue to rise. We had a project that we ourselves had to pull off and not do because the cost had increased so much. In fact, we were going to borrow for it in July. We ended up not doing it because it had come in so much over budget. So again, our lease cost is fixed based on our agreement. Also, there is rising conditions. As I mentioned in our financial model, we used a 3% borrowing rate. In July when we borrowed, it was about 3.2%, so we were a little north of that. And then also the value of the land in New Hanover County continues to increase. I know no one can predict the future, but as I mentioned before, the fair market value, the value of the property currently is higher than what we had initially used in our financial model, so that makes the financial model even better.
So you're on the MOU now?
Well, no,
Okay.
I really, we weren't here to talk necessarily about the MOU because really what we're asking for approval for is the lease. And
But the MOU's putting a gun to my head and saying that if this board doesn't approve this, then the taxpayers in New Hanover County are going to have to pay the Zimmer organization $2.5 million.
What?
so that MOU, that condition in the MOU was not intended in any way, shape, or form to box the LGC in. That was for our commissioners to approve purchasing the designs that have been done if the LGC doesn't approve this, because the county needs a new museum and library, and we want to continue down that path, regardless of whether it's the P3 partnership or not. Obviously, we want to pursue the P3 partnership because we feel like it adds a lot of value. But regardless, our commission felt like it was important, the library and museum project was important enough that we would purchase the plans and specs from the developer. It says $2.5 million. It says not to exceed whatever the developer has spent on those designs is what we would pay them to purchase that point. We wouldn't want to start the project over. We've gone through schematic design. We've gone through space study. We've gone through construction documents. We wouldn't want to start the process over in terms of the library and the museum. So that's what that particular section is.
So the calls that I get from the local media are kind of stuck with the words that are on the paper. And it says, in the event the parties are unable to obtain necessary approval from the local government commission, or in the event either of the parties terminate the memorandum in accordance with any right of termination that exists, notwithstanding the provisions of so and so and so and so, that the developer's interest in the project plans, the purchase price equal to the developer's planning cost not to exceed $2.5 million after the 10 days after the developer's middle of invoices reflecting these planning costs. So
Yeah, so if-
whether you didn't think you intended to do that or not, that's the message that's out there. That if this board doesn't approve something, and something, I mean, it just sends the wrong message that if another body doesn't approve something, the unsuspecting taxpayers in New Hanover County are going to have to pay the developer $2.5 million, for things that they have spent money on. Now, nobody's disagreeing with that, but I mean, you spend $2.5 million like that on lots of different things. I just didn't see the necessity. I'm just being personal here of putting this in an MOU. But you could spend $2.5 million on 7 police cars or 2 fire trucks, or you don't need you can spend on anything. I just don't know why it was necessary to put that in there.
So it was in there because the LGC was in our first memorandum of understanding. So the entire deal was predicated on obtaining approval. So the MOU stated that if we didn't get LGC approval, that the agreement terminated. And so instead, our Board of Commissioners said, look, this project is important to us. So if the LGC doesn't approve this, we want to purchase the plans from you, developer. So that's why that was in there.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have the benefit of seeing the MOU. I guess it was submitted to LGC.
I just requested.
Okay, well, I haven't seen it. But who is responsible for the maintenance on the library? What happens in the event of some destruction? I know there's insurance on it, but
there would be insurance. The maintenance on the facility, the interior and would be on the county. Any exterior features, so the roof, foundation, the windows, those sorts of things would be the responsibility of the developer.
this is a side question, but we're talking about a construction project here. Is New Hanover County doing anything in its construction and bidding process with regard to greater resiliency? We just approved a total of $51 million for Hurricane Floyd damage to UNCW. Let's face it, you're in the eye a lot of times. Have you all changed, and are you making more resilient buildings? Is this going to be a really resilient building?
So I'll certainly let the developer touch on the construction piece of it. I will tell you with the government center project, that was forefront in our mind because we have our 911 and EOC being constructed within that facility. So there was a hard structure just for those functions, and if we have a storm, that's where everyone's going to. But I would defer to the developer in the construction.
I can speak really quickly to that. So we've worked really hard with the county on not only just the maintenance and resiliency, but also energy efficiency.
Just identify yourself once again for the minutes and the people in the audience.
Adam Tucker with Zimmer Development. So yes, we've worked really hard. Part of that has been talking about how to operate after an event. So we'll have generators that can be brought in and run the building. The museum itself is designed to hold 175 pounds per square inch. So it is a 12-inch, or I think it's actually 16 inches of concrete in the floors to make sure that if they want to bring a tank in, they can bring a tank in for an exhibit space. So it'll be the last building standing downtown if the big one hits. It's very, it's a hefty design. Very hefty.
Again, appreciate the time and opportunity to talk with you about this. I realize it's complex, but because of the size of the lease and the length of the lease, we do have to get approval from the local government commission to enter into that. I did want to mention also that we have a lot of community support for this project. We've received letters and comments from the Chamber of Commerce, Wilmington Downtown Inc., Wilmington Business Development, both the Library and the Museums Advisory Board, the Workforce Housing Advisory Committee, and the Mayor of the City of Wilmington. We did prepare, in addition to the memo that you mentioned, we made some copies of those letters, so you all should have copies of those as well. But we did submit an application to the local government commission staff. As I said, we've had many calls and conversations with them, and we believe we've satisfied any questions or concerns that they've had. So we submitted the application in June. So we are requesting that this board approve the project. That's
We sort of dominated the questioning from the floor, and for the members who are here in person, I want to open it up for any questions of board members who are joining us by Zoom.
None.
She's trying to chime in. Ms. Harvey, you're trying to ask a question?
I just indicated that there were no questions from me.
Okay. Mr. Philback?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Butler?
Yes. Lisa, this is Paul Butler. Does this project have unanimous support from the Board of County Commissioners? Has it had unanimous support from its beginning?
I believe so, yes.
Different commissioners.
My next question, why wouldn't you just sell the land that the developer wants to buy? Just sell that, put it up for public auction, sell it, take the money, and build your library and museum on the parcel of land you want to do it. If you don't get enough money, borrow the rest.
Yeah, so for the very reasons that we were talking about throughout the presentation, this is a block of downtown that is visible. It's one of the first things you see when you drive downtown, and it's extremely important for us to have the synergy between what's going to be on each side of the block. And so that's why we pursued the P3 partnership rather than just selling to the highest bidder and hoping that they build relatively soon and build what we would like.
Well, I'm very familiar with Wilmington. There's a park there in front of the museum that's very seldom used, and there's a hotel across from the old Belts building that it looks like elderly folks stay in. Have you just got a ballpark figure what it would take you to build these two buildings on the land you already own?
I would say roughly 50 million to build the facility that's been designed.
And do you have just if you put the property up on bid, like a house in Wilmington where you get to upset the bid on it, what you think that land would sell for that's marked to go to the developer? You just put an ad in the paper and wanted to sell it.
$2.5 million.
You said $2.5 million. Couldn't you borrow the money cheaper with your bond ratings to build the facility on your own? If you're going to pay $4 million a month for 4 months, for 20 years?
So certainly the interest rate would be cheaper, but we lose out on all the benefits that we talked about in the P3 model.
So can I ask a question, Mr. Butler, on top of your question?
Please, Treasurer.
So the $2.5 million of architectural cost, plan cost. Going back to Mr. Butler's question, if you just paid it, bought the plans, and did what Mr. Butler just said, would it be more cost efficient for the taxpayers?
Again, the purpose of the project is the whole block. It's
I know, but
not
you got
just
one bidder.
our,
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you.
it's not just the the museum and the library. It is an entire block that we're trying to revitalize in the downtown area. And for us to be able to do that, that's why we're pursuing the P3 project.
I did some homework this morning on the Winston-Salem Forsyth County main library. This is the library, for those of you who've never seen it. I know construction costs were different, but this piece of property is 17 times bigger than what you're proposing as far as square footage. I'm sure it's different. It's probably not hurricane strengthened in Winston-Salem. And it costs $32 million. So now you're saying that you could do this privately, possibly for around $50 million. The long-term value of this lease is $80 million. I'm not asking you to build this in Wilmington, but it's a beautiful facility, by the way. So, and I know costs have gone up. Don't read too much into this, but maybe they're coming down. This is a $32 million facility, which is 16% larger than what you're proposing to build. And that's the Forsyth County main library. 110,000.
Ours is 85.
Yeah, 16%. I'd calculate all this before you even came in here. So, just following on Mr. Butler's question, if you had to buy the plans and go without the 3P partnership and put the plan up for upset bid. So that's all I had.
Right. But I'm making the assumption that there are some additional costs that can be attributable to the fact this is built as a museum also.
Yes, there
are. There's
you can't
flooring,
just put up sheetrock.
there's flooring and walls and other things that add to the cost that would be more than if it was just a library.
Okay. HVAC, the whole, everything. So
very, very redundant HVAC on those.
Is there any other questions from board members?
Treasurer Paul Butler, Lisa, how do you think this would fare on a referendum in New Hanover County for GO bond?
I can't speak to what all of the voters would approve. Certainly during the public hearings, we had a number of folks and organizations come out to speak in favor of it. So if I had to give you an answer, I feel like it would pass. But again, I don't want to speak for the voters of New Hanover County.
Have they ever turned down a bond referendum for any reason? Oh, they have? All right, but generally speaking, they just thumbs up. All right. Any other questions from those either here or remotely? Okay. I'm going to close by saying that we tried to keep you here long enough to spend some money in Raleigh instead of everybody spending money in Hanover County, but obviously we haven't succeeded in that. Secretary Penny has to leave in a few minutes, and we have another part of the agenda to approve several hundred millions of dollars of viable utility reserve that our members are going to have a lot of questions on. I'll close by saying this, but asking this. I don't speak for the board. I deal really better with disclosure and not discovery. I don't like discovering things. I deal better with disclosing things, even if it may not be good news. I'm not sure if the staff's going to agree with me on this, but I'm just telling you anyway. So is there any question that we haven't asked, whether from the Zimmer organization or from the elected officials, governmental staff that's here? Is there any question we haven't asked that we should have, that we might ultimately get the answer to, and we might not like the fact that we just weren't headed strong enough to ask it at the time? Nothing.
Transparent.
Huh? Nothing from the See, from the Zimmer organization, no question.
Sir, again, we're very excited. We've been working on this for 4 years and we're ready to go. And as Lisa was saying, the plans are done for the most part and we're ready to get into permitting and get started. So anything we can do to help you guys understand better or more information, love to have a positive vote today. So if at all possible, but we appreciate the time and the questions. They were good questions.
Well, I can tell you that the board and staff are totally working on this as hard as we can. So I can tell you that.
So it'll be on the agenda later.
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes, ma'am.
can we all have copies of
You can have anything you want,
the
Secretary.
memorandum of
You
understanding?
can have anything you want. I run a big organization. I don't know what people have and what they don't have.
Mr. Treasurer, there were printed copies for the members available here in person, so perhaps they could email to our staff the packets provided to our virtual members.
Is the MOU in their packet?
And it is not, Secretary Marshall, we can provide that in that as well. That's actually online, I believe. So
Online for the county?
the county has it available on their website, I believe, on the project.
This is Cindy Aiken speaking. We would be remiss if we did not mention that there is opposition. How much, I do not know, but we have received from one citizen a couple of emails along the course of this asking and we can share that again, but there's a group apparently opposition to tearing down the current building. But again, just so you know, for informational purposes, there is that. And
Well,
this morning we got
To say there's opposition and then to say there's one person, those are two different things. There's two different things.
We've heard from one person who supposedly represents a group.
And the group is how big?
I don't know. Save our something. What's it called? Save the library.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Vice Chair.
My name's Deb Hayes. Again, I'm Vice Chair of the County Commission, and I do not want to elongate your meeting because I know what that means. So, as a matter of fact, last night, I want to thank you all for the opportunity, and I know you're here to really review and understand all the financial aspects, but I want to bring the people aspect to this so that you can understand that as well. There is overwhelming support for this project. Yes, there is some opposition. It is small and it has continued to dwindle, especially after the project was presented and announced and all the renderings and everything from the architect were presented. People were just completely blown away with what we could do in New Hanover County, the second smallest landmass in the state of North Carolina. But we are venturing on an incredibly dynamic and impactful, positively impactful project that really has far-reaching impacts to our entire downtown area, not just the central business district, not just the city of Wilmington, but also in our region. And it will bring state-of-the-art library, museum, and services to our citizens that we quite honestly don't have anywhere in our region. And I would venture to say that a county our size anywhere doesn't have this type of project, civic center project going on and have the potential to do this. So I would like to just add to that for your all's consideration. It is a game changer for our downtown, for our region. Yes.
Is this at or close to public transportation?
Yes, ma'am. It is absolutely. There is a trolley system that runs downtown, and there's also the Wave Transit bus station. Fordham Station is right 1 block away. So, yes, ma'am.
Madam Vice, I'm not asking you to negotiate in public, but and I'm going to ask the Zimmer folks the same thing. If this provision in the MOU, is there any appetite on this? If the LGC doesn't approve this, that the county pays the Zimmers $2.5 million to move that? Is there any appetite for that at all? They could buy the plans from you anytime for anything they want. fine for. Is there any appetite for removing that part of the MOU on the $2.5 million? They can buy these plants from you anytime, anywhere, for any price they choose. We don't have any. But is there any appetite on removing that part from the MOU? No.
Why? Because we're out there spending, I mean, we've spent over $1.5 million right now.
Okay.
And right now we have without that provision, if this goes away, there's nothing for us to be reimbursed for. I mean,
But they can pay you for them anyway.
they can, but they don't have to. If that provision is removed, there's no, I mean, we're still spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially now that the plans are getting to the end and the contractors are getting on board. It's hundreds of thousands. It's not tens of thousands we're spending. And in order for us to keep spending and keep this progress going, we have to have assurances that we can be reimbursed.
It's been answered, so I'm gonna stop that. So I want to tell you that, as you know, the R for Grace stands for Radical Hospitality. I hope that you feel like that it's been intense, but I hope you feel like that you've been treated hospitably here today. You're always welcome here. We've tried to deal with these questions in a fair and just way.
But it's easy to talk about things when you're passionate about it, right? So I'm more than happy to sit here all day.
Okay.
I want you guys to, and I learned, I found money on NC Cash from my sister and my dad. Never know.
Well, I have my own memorandum of understanding. If you find it while you're sitting in this conference room, forget about popcorn. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Chair, will this be on next month's?
Thank you. All right, Susan. Update.
All right, I'm speaking from attachment B. Unit updates, budget amendments, and resolutions. For the communities of Eureka and Robertsonville, I have several items that I need you to vote on. Specifically for the town of Eureka, if you look on page 3, we've got the unit update. On page 4 of this document, I've got the 2023 budget message. On page 5 through 7, there's a 2023 budget ordinance that will need your vote. And then on pages 8 through 10, there is a resolution for a sewer rate increase for the town of Eureka. So the 2023 budget message on page 5 is for total appropriations in the general fund, supported with estimated revenues of $216,078. On page 6, the total appropriations for their sewer operations and are supported with estimated revenues for the sewer fund of $441,324. Now, the town of Eureka's charter is suspended at the current time, and we are not required to do an annual budget in accordance with 159 because of that. But we do one because we prefer to operate that way transparently. So in a moment, I'm going to ask, I would like to take these all together, both the Eureka and the Robertsonville items together. Is that
Without
okay?
objection?
One vote?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I've got on page 8, there's a resolution relating to rate increases for the town of Eureka that are effective August 2nd with the adoption of these rates. On page 9, you'll see a note that the town of Fremont, who processes the sewer for Eureka, raised their rates by 20%. And so this rate increase is passing that along. If you look at page 10, you'll see the letter that came from the town of Fremont to Eureka that notified the town of the increase that was effective July 1. So we are passing all the rate increase is doing is passing along that rate to the towns through the bills. These items that I have for the town of Robertsonville are on page 14. Start on page 14 of this packet. I've got a resolution that accepts a DUR grant. If you look at the top of page 15, you'll see that the town was awarded a state reserve project of $267,500 and a loan for that same amount, and so there's a state reserve grant for $267,000 and a $382,500 grant from the Viable Reserve, Utility Reserve, that you're being asked to vote on as the governing board of Robertsonville in this case.
Susan, just a quick note too. This is sort of an accompanying of, I think it was April, the commission voted as the commission to approve some of these loans to grants. They were loans, they were replaced with BUR grants. Those have all been, you've all adopted that resolution and approved those grants. So this is the sort of accompanying on the local government part side, now accepting that grant. The grant terms require the local governments to pass a resolution accepting the grant. So that's just what this part is.
Yes, if you look down at the bottom of page 15, the town of Robertsonville does accept $382,500 grant from the Viable Utility Reserve and $267,500 from the state reserve grant. And then on pages 18 through 23, there are, I'm sorry, I skipped 17. Page 17, which is missing a number. I do apologize for that. Page 17, a budget amendment for water operating fund. That's to fund part of one of the grants that's on a subsequent page with a transfer from operations of $7,700. And then on pages 18 through 23, there are 3 project ordinances for 3 different capital projects. A water system improvement project for $650,000 on page 18. A 2018 wastewater system improvements project for $686,500. That's on page 20. And then a water capital project fund for $2.2 million. That's on page 22. And these are all funded with various BUR grants that you will see there. And all of these, Sharon, I believe all of the grant items have been approved by SWIA prior to being presented to the commission. Yes. So the other items that are on there are unit updates for units that we are managing. So I would urge you to look at those and let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, Treasurer, this is Paul. Hey, Ms. McCullen,
Yes.
have they got adequate staff people to monitor this, get the job done, see that it's done right? Has this town got adequate staff to implement this?
Y'all are running the town.
Well, we are, but we're not going to be managing their grants. Sharon, you want to speak to that? Because we talked about that before.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the VUR items. But as part of the actual grant agreements that the town will execute, we can ask for certain requirements to be in there about grant management. Certainly, as long as we're in Robertsonville, we'll make sure that the grants are managed appropriately. But we are not likely to be in the town making their promises, but we're not likely to be in control all the way through completion of all of these projects. So that's something we would want to make sure is in place.
Sharon, let me ask you this. Looking at the budget, it looks like engineering is about 20-some%. Then we have a small administration fee, and is 20% about standard on this for engineering to do this type of work now with as much work as there is?
I don't know. I'll ask our DEQ folks if that's an appropriate amount.
It looks a little high to me. I mean, you just take 10. I mean, it looks like it's over 20% on both projects. So.
Guys are approving the asset inventory.
Are you referring to the construction projects or the asset inventory and assessment projects?
I'm referring to the total of $650,000, of which 135 is engineering. And then the next one is $686,000, which engineering is $140,000.
Those are construction.
And then, these are all construction. And then for the water system improvements, the project is $2.2 million and engineering is $227,500.
If I may.
Sure, Mr. Butler, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Shadi Asghab, the Director of Division of Water Infrastructure. When we're managing construction projects like this, there are often a lot of times pre-construction planning and engineering design. Those are types of costs that would go into the project cost as well. Whether or not this is
give us a visual example of what that is. What you just said.
So once they embark on a project, if they're funded a project, they need to be designing the project. They need to work with an engineering firm to design the project. And then submit for permits, approvals, need to communicate with DEQ on the regulatory side, make sure that all the approvals are done. That requires a lot of engineering work and engineering design. They work with our staff to make sure that the engineering design is correct and adequate to be able to complete the project and provide the benefits of the project as designed. They do all that pre-construction planning and design prior to bidding out the project and actually starting construction. So I'm not as familiar specifically with any particular project. So this one, I don't know what goes into I see $140,000 in this estimate here. If it includes pre-construction planning, this would not be unusual. Looking to Vic to see if you know anything particular about this one project.
No, I don't know anything. Not specifically about these awards. I mean, the engineering costs are usually customized for each project, just depending on what some of those requirements are in terms of permitting. So that's why there might be a difference in terms of the percentage of one construction contract versus the other.
Well, who negotiated who did you actually negotiate that with? The LGC staff or Robertsonville staff, or who's the human being you talked to about this?
Is this an ARPA swap or is this a?
This was submitted by the applicant, so by Robertsonville. could have been submitted by their consultant.
Probably by their
Probably.
engineering firm would have helped them with it.
Right, so
Yeah.
most of the applications that come to us for funding comes from either the town themselves, but most of the times it's coming from the engineering firms or the application preparer is usually a consulting firm, or it could be a council of government in some cases. So they would apply, and we have a streamlined process for the application and awards early on. Once awarded, we work with them being the town as well as their consulting firms together to ensure the design aspects and the administration of the project as well. So there's a lot of communications that happen back and forth post-award. And that comes with the town as well as the engineering firm.
And for both the traditional applications as well as the swap applications, the town does have to sign off on the application, so they see that.
I think what Mr. Butler's getting at is just because you've always paid a certain price or a certain percentage for a certain kind of service, you've got, especially hundreds of millions of dollars floating around the state.
Yeah.
No pun intended. You got to push back and you got to break par. And you just got to. You just got to tell people that's out of whack. Go sharpen your pencil and come back to it.
That happens a lot, especially on the design side. If they're over designing something, our staff will be able to see that and say, look, there's an alternative approach that might be cheaper, more cost effective.
All right.
So we try to do that during the construction part.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, it's all reimbursement based, so the engineering costs are reviewed by our grants management unit before disbursements are made. And that includes, their hours, or not estimated, but their actual hours.
Just trying to keep y'all out of the newspapers. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Anything else?
that's it, Dale. That's it, Treasurer.
Thank you. Ready for a motion? Okay. Would you tell us what you like the motion to say?
What I would like the motion to say? Cindy,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
we'll be voting on Eureka, the Eureka items as well as the Robertsonville
To
items.
be specific, that's the Eureka 2023 budget ordinance. The resolution to adopt sewer rate increase for Eureka. And then 5 different Robertsonville resolutions. The budget amendment to move money to pay a closing fee for the VUR loan. Acceptance of the VUR grant. And then these 3 project ordinances for 2 water and 1 wastewater project. So that's what?
Okay.
7 different resolutions.
All right.
Any objection to?
Do I hear that motion?
So moved, Arderwood.
Second. Do I hear? Thank you. Second, Mr. Marshall. Motion is second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
All right, so once again, two resolutions for Eureka, 5 total for Robertsonville. Wood, Marshall, motion second. Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler. Thanks. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck
Aye.
and the treasurer.
Aye. Okay.
Okay, so the next 3 items, these are the last action items on the agenda, are attachment C, attachment D, and attachment E. All 3 of these are related to viable utility reserve designations and grants. And all of these items were voted on and approved by SWIA at its July meeting. So the first one is attachment C, a resolution modifying VUR distress designations. I won't go through the whole thing. I'll just give you a summary of what we're asking you to do. Essentially what happened is back in April, the commission as well as SWIA voted on some designations that later turned out to be flawed because of a mistake that was made with the data. And this resolution is now to correct that. we ended up with 3 entities that were initially voted on as distressed that using the correct data did not calculate out with a high enough score to be deemed distressed. That's Berkeley County, Edgecombe County, and the town of Granite Falls. So the first part of this resolution is to essentially undesignate them as distressed. The second part is we had 11 local governments that met or exceeded the assessment score for the first time, and they had not previously been designated as distressed, but they requested designation. And so we are proposing that these units be identified as distressed under criteria 3, again, because they scored out high enough. These are the towns of Columbia, Jamesville, Lake Lure, Liberty, Bryson City, Saratoga, Taylorsville, Ayden, Love Valley, Ocracoke Sanitary District, and Pittsburgh. Moving forward then, and the last item in this resolution is request to designate Edgecombe County as distressed under criteria 4. Earlier in the resolution, it undesignates them under criteria 3 because they did not score out high enough, but we're asking that they be, I guess, redesignated under criteria 4, which is the criteria that is based on information known to the authority, meaning SWIA, and the LGC. Our reasons for requesting this are that the county has been active in providing regional water and sewer services to its small municipalities and unincorporated areas of the county. They've been doing this for a number of years in Edgecombe County and continue to expand their efforts there. And that is one of the goals of the Viable Utility Reserve program, is to increase regional services. The Commission and SWIA approved an award of $1.9 million DUR grant to Edgecombe back in May for a project that's going to replace and expand a booster pump station. And that was based on the county's designation as distressed. That project will allow for continued investment and development of the infrastructure in their industrial park. And it will continue to support a viable water and wastewater system in that part of the county. Also, Edgecombe suffered a significant loss to their community and their tax base following the fire at QVC in December of 2021. And finally, the county has expressed an interest in being designated as distressed. So again, we're asking for the commission to designate them under category 4, which is other facts known to the SWIA and LDC. Lastly, we've got the town of McCattonville also is asking to be distressed under criteria 4. Based on the following information, they've requested designation on the basis of anticipated non-viability due to challenges that they expect to face in the next 5 to 10 years. Towns indicated that their rates will become untenable if they have to continue to operate as their own system and not consolidate with someone else. Two Rivers Utility has offered a letter of support and is willing to take on the system for McCattonville. They currently operate and maintain the system via contract, and they're already interconnected. And this would just be that last step of Two Rivers taking ownership of McCattonville's system. Documentation that was submitted to the SWIA supports the assertion that a complete consolidation is the only option to ensure McCattonville's viability in the future. SWIA also stipulated when they approved it that there would be an agreement in place before the grant is awarded, that the MOU executed on the merger. Did I get that right, Shadi?
Yes, but SWIA only designated them as distressed. There was no award. There is no VUR grant that comes with
right.
it. So,
in the future, if there is a grant, one of the grant requirements will be there is an executed MOU to do that consolidation once the repairs have been made to the mechanical system.
What was that anticipated? What? Use the term a minute ago, anticipated stress.
Untenable, unviability.
Anticipated unviability.
Right now, if you look at the cat bill, they don't score as distressed because they've done a good job, quite frankly, of managing what they've got. But looking forward, based on what they anticipate the repairs that they're going to need are, and what their costs will be, that they will not be viable in the future.
Just as a reminder, all the employees in North Carolina get an employee book from OSHR, and there's actually a page there that says voluntary accidental death and dismemberment benefit. So voluntary accidental death and dismemberment benefit. It's actually in the employee book. No, been there for 6 years. So when you said that sentence, maybe
Voluntary to sign up for it, but not for the dismemberment.
Right.
All right, so
I'll bring it next time, Secretary Marshall. This meeting. Secretary Marshall's booklet next time, so she can actually get it through. Good. All right. Go ahead.
this is, we're ready for a motion on this one, unless you want to wait and do all three.
Any without objection, we'll do all three at one time. Okay.
All right, so that's again the one on modifying distress designations. All right, moving on to attachment D. This is approving loans to grants. This is the last batch of swaps, basically, where we're swapping out a few SRF loans, and I guess they're all SRF loans, to VUR ARPA grants in order to, number one, facilitate spending all of this money by December 31st, 2024, and making sure it's all, awarding it all by then and having it under contract and making sure it's all spent by 2026. Commission and SWE have already approved, I believe, 2 batches of these, and again, this is the last one that we're aware of. All right, we have 4 units. These were all awarded SRF loans. 2 of them had previously been approved by the commission. 2 of them had not been approved. None of these had the project actually started yet, and that's why they're eligible for this swap. In the town of Bellhaven, the town of Eatonton, the town of Clifton, and the city of Goldsboro. In addition to swapping out the SRF, they all have updated costs on their projects, and of course the cost went up, and so the ARPA grant will also take care of that as well. Any questions about those items?
Treasurer, can I just ask a question? All of these grants, they're all coming out of this American Rescue Plan, this $490-some million that is going to help the water and sewer situation in smaller communities. Is that all this money coming from there, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
All right, so that's the second item, is approving that loan to grant swap for those 4 communities. The last item is the big one. This is the VUR grants. Again, these were approved by SWE at its July meeting. LGC is only approving the grants that are coming out of the VUR funding. SWE actually awarded over $789 million in grants and loans in July. It's 385 applications across 86 counties. And the total applications that they received was a record $3.12 billion. So you can see that the applications far outstripped the money that was available. There is about, I believe, 28% of this funding still available for the fall funding round.
The VUR about 25%.
VUR is about 25%. Okay, so there will be another round in September. So you'll see this again in December or January, somewhere in there.
Early next year.
For the rest of the money. So the table 1, again, I'm on attachment E. Table 1 is the asset inventory and assessment grants. The General Assembly set aside a certain amount of money just for the study bills, the studies rather. The total that is coming out of the VUR funding that the LGC is being asked to approve was $5.7 million. for all of the units you see there on page 3. If anybody's interested in me reading through all of them, I can do that, but y'all probably read better than I do. Table 2 is the drinking water VUR project, construction project funding. Again, this starts on page 4, which is labeled, and goes through to halfway down page 5, and that's $101.2 million. Table 3 is wastewater projects, again from VUR. Starts in the middle of page 5 and goes over to the back on page 6. And that total is $109.9 million. These are all grants, not loans, but statutes require that LGC sign off on them.
Any questions? Just want to say that staff's done a lot of work on this, as well as the SWIA board. I regret saying that I just don't want to wake up 5 years from now and have spent $500 million on important under the ground water and sewer needs, especially rural North Carolina, not have anything to show for it. And I'm not being skeptical, I'm just being fearful. And I think everybody on this board has a certain level of subject matter expertise on these particular topics. I'm probably the least of the subject matter experts. And we're just trying the best we can to measure 5 times and cut once, and consolidate, regionalize, get straws to places that they need to get to, so that we can, have long-term solutions to some of these major problems, and not just wake up 5 years from now and the money be gone and we got nothing to show for it. So, just want to, yes.
Remind me, who is going back around to make sure that everything that was supposed to be done got done and got done to the specs it was supposed to be done?
I can start out answering that, but then I'll let the folks from DEQ take that up. These are all reimbursement-driven grants, so they won't get the grant money unless they turn in the appropriate paperwork to document what they've spent it on.
That's not her question.
That's not what I asked.
Go ahead.
Again, I asked who's going around and visiting these towns and making sure that what they were supposed to put in is what they did put in.
Part of our, again, this is Shadi Escamp with Division of Water and Infrastructure. When we have construction projects, we have staff that inspect the work as well. So we send out inspectors to go and monitor the construction of the projects, as well as monitoring the documentation and the paperwork as well. So we're working with the engineers and the towns on the designs. We ensure that the permits are done correctly. We ensure that the documentation is required for the federal requirements that come with the funding is all completed correctly. And we send inspectors out to inspect the construction work. Now, with the Viable Utilities Reserve, we also have all the additional requirements. If you're designated as distressed, you have you need to complete an asset inventory, assessment, a rate study. You need to do mandatory training. You need to complete an action plan. We have staff that are monitoring and working with those systems as well, and that's whether or not they have funding. So we have staff to monitor the completion of the Viable Utilities Reserve requirements, and we have staff that are monitoring the work for construction as well.
How many people do you have as the inspectors of monitoring the construction or the?
So our division has at this point about 60 staff, and we're trying to staff up. So we've been posting a lot of positions and creating a lot of new positions to staff up because of the ARPA funding increased workload.
What's your background?
My background is, and most of them are engineers, environmental engineers, mechanical engineers, or civil engineers, and we have some. Vast majority of them are engineers. A few of them have some, we have accountants, we have administrative staff as well. That's the majority of that.
Thank you.
My concern with so much work on the street that somebody wants to cut corners on rebar or on you know, the pump needs to have 5,000 PSI and it's only, they bought a 4,000 PSI pump or whatever. I mean, so much work on the street. I just think you gotta be very, very careful.
Treasurer, this is Paul Butler. The members of the board know I've expressed this concern before. And you comment about my age. I'm not going to hold it against you about how young you are. But as I have said before, I'm old enough that I remember in the 70s as county manager, after we came out of the 60s with all the spending, the Farmers Home Administration just had money just flowing everywhere to do these countywide water and sewer studies all over, and the engineering firms were just getting wealthy. And those studies today, you can go in Duplin County, Sampson County, Robertson County, Columbus County, and you'll find copies of those. And some of these things they may be discussing today are still sitting there. And Dale, I share with you that 5 years from now, if I'm still around, that we're not going to look back and say, well, why are we closing the sewer plant in this town? And why did we do that when we spent all X hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars? And I hope, and the fact that it was shoved over on us, I have expressed to several legislators since we last met about this very program, about it being handed off to the LGC. We have no water expertise people on our staff. It appears that you wanted to legitimize it because of the credibility of the local government commission, that we've never had a project go south on us. And I just wished we weren't voting on it. I've expressed that from day one, and I still have a huge concern about the quality of work that we're going to get done with this much money, as you said, on the street at this time. And I hope these fellows that are hiring the inspectors would put some sort of incentive program to find what is not being done and compensate them to look for everything being done, and not seeing all the faults that could be taking place in the installation. And you know, they says, well, we met the design standards. It was like permitting. It's who put in what goes into the permit. You want to be in the room when that's being designed, what's going to be in the permit. Yeah, we met the permitting requirements, but I will share with y'all, I am not comfortable with this. And I have shared it with members of the legislature in southeastern North Carolina, who really, quite frankly, did not even know what I was talking about. But with that, we've got it. It's saddled with us, and I guess it's a tribute to the LGC that you wanted to have the LGC sign off on these things to make it look more legitimate and that it will hold up. But all of you, our staff, we have no water people on our staff. We have no engineering people on our staff. We're just going along with what the state water agency is recommending to us. And I hope they're on track. I'm ready to do with whatever you want to, Treasurer.
Thank you. And plus, when you find a bad apple in terms of a contractor, that you put them in timeout, like forever. I mean, you gotta start out like you're gonna hold out as far as these bad actors.
All right. I had a talk yesterday with an accountant in Wilmington about how these accounting firms, as Auditor Wood has said, that aren't fulfilling their contracts, they're getting retainers, and how they can be reported to their board, not fulfill getting the audits into our to the LGC as they're required. And I think we're going to come to something on the agenda that's going to show just how far behind we are on so many audits across the state. It's been a long day, Treasurer. Let's go.
It's only second shift, man.
You gotta realize it's time for my nap soon.
Get up till noon. All right. Are we done?
We need a motion.
Well, yeah, we need motions, and then we have two just announced.
All right. The motion to adopt a resolution, VR resolution, attachment C, attachment D, and attachment E.
Exactly.
So moved. Burns.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion?
Treasurer, I'll just make one, this is Mike Philbeck. Let's make one comment. If I remember correctly, Cliffside Sanitary District, which is not 15 miles from me, has about 73 customers. And I know it's ARPA money and all of that, but $2.8 million is something like $40,000 per connection for repairs and retrofit. It's just, seems to me it's a lot, but hey, it is
So
what
what
it
are
is.
you doing? All right, Mr. Philback, what is that? We put a septic tank in for $5,000.
Well, if you remember, one of the issues there, I think, is a lot of those are little mill houses on very small lots.
Mr. Philbeck, two of those customers are schools. There's a public school and then there's a charter school that district serves as well.
I'm not going to vote against it, and I understand that. It just seems like a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
But what will it end up when you spend that $2.5 million? What will that? Is that still going to be a water and sewer district?
Well, if y'all remember, town of Bowling Springs, which is in Cleveland County, and Cliffside's in Rutherford County, but it's a long ways. I don't think you could put I don't know how many pumps and how hard it would be, but it'd probably cost more than $2.8 million.
Yeah, the long range plan there is, there's discussions with Broad River Authority to take over the ownership and operation of the system, but it would remain a standalone system because of the distance to other facilities.
Okay. All right, we got a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Okay, not the clerk call roll.
And so that everyone knows, Secretary Penny had to leave about 10 minutes ago, so he's absent. So we have Burns Marshall for these three resolutions. Auditor Wood. Aye. Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Philbeck. And Treasurer Falwell. Aye. Thank you.
Two FYIs.
The first one is regarding the new unit assistance list. It's in your packet. I won't take the time to go through it in detail. The cutoff date for this was May the 9th, and we had 71 municipalities that are on the list because their audits were not in as of May the 9th. That number as of today is down to 50, which is still high, but it's better than 71. The number of counties that were on the list as of May 9th was 7. That number today is down to 4. And sanitary districts was 5, and that is down to 4. If you want to look over the list, and if anybody has questions, please reach out to me or bring them to the next commission.
Where is it? You didn't put it in.
It's in attachment F.
Attachment F, yes.
Sorry.
What page in attachment F?
It's the board with the green, yellow, and red on it.
Not there. All right, I'm with you.
The second item is also in attachment F, is a summary of Senate Bill 255, the Bond Info Transparency Act, and the LED Toolkit 2. It involves some new required disclosures by local governments when they sell bonds, new interim event reporting required of our local governments, and in a future meeting, you'll be getting a policy as to what those interim events will be. And then the local governments will be required to report to us when they have one of those. And it would be things like loss of a major taxpayer, or bankruptcy of a major taxpayer, or a major employer pulling out of town, that kind of thing. Those are just really big clues that the town's going to have financial issues. And so us knowing about it when it happens, rather than finding out about it when the audit comes in, which may be a year or two later, will just give us that much more lead time to deal with issues. The third item, we modified the requirements for finance officer fidelity bonds. The minimum is still $50,000, but there's a cap now of up to $1 million, and it's based on how much their annually budgeted funds are. So there is some correlation now to how much bond they're required to have to the size of their budgets. That goes in effect January 1st, 2023. The bond transparency goes into effect October 1st to allow folks that were in the process when this was passed to finish up. So that happens There's a notification requirement now when a new entity is formed. It's subject to GS 159. They have to let us know. This has been a bit of a problem for us for a number of years, and typically it's things like tourism development authorities and that kind of thing, where a government will go out and get approval to have one of those, and then we find out about it, just later. So, and in some cases, 2 or 3 years later, and they've not been submitting audits or following 159. And the final modification is for the threshold for LGC approval for debt contracts. That's being lowered for units that are on the UAL. That goes into effect October 1st. And this is something that we'll be monitoring as we move forward with this and see if we need to adjust it. Right now, we dropped the limit to $50,000, which may be too low. We'll have to wait and see how many debt agreements that involves. And it does only apply to units that are on the UAL. So this is not statewide. This is limited to the 150 municipalities and 12 counties that are on this list. So,
Any questions?
We will be sending out an email to all commission members just asking for whether you'll be attending offsite with us in September at the 4-H Center so we can put final plans in place. So try to send that out tomorrow, just ask for responses.
The people out there are very excited. So the chancellor of the state excited because it's a 4-H camp by North Carolina State, right? They're too much.
And again, just to note too that that is a different date in September. That's Thursday the 22nd, Thursday, September 22nd, which is not our usual meeting date. So.
All right. Anything else? With that, in honor of Wayne County Deputy Matt Fishman, I'd like to request that we adjourn in honor. Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Secretary Marshall? Aye. Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Andrew?
Thank you. All right.